faithfully delivering value, exploring great books from around the world. Hello, this is Sally's Book Talk. Today, I'll interpret the book called Between Tradition and Modernity for you, Wang Tao and the Late Qing Reforms. This book tells the story of a historical figure named Wang Tao from the late Qing dynasty. This character might be unfamiliar to many, but he has a really interesting nickname. Originally, Longmao Zhuangyuan referred to the disheveled Taiping rebels. So how did this Taiping Heavenly Kingdom's top scholar get tied to late Qing reforms? Wasn't Hong Rengan the Ganwine who wrote Zixing Xinbian, the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom's most famous reform theorist? Oh, I've never heard of this Wang Tao guy, huh? What does between tradition and modernity in the book title actually mean? The answers to these questions, well, listen as I explain them step by step. First, let's look at Wang Tao's life experiences. In 1828, Wang Tao was born in Fuli Town, now part of Suzhou City, Jiangsu Province. Like many scholarly families back then, Wang Tao received formal traditional education from childhood, building a solid foundation in Confucianism. At 18, Wang Tao was praised by examiners for his writing's unusual spirit, meaning extraordinary flair, and was promoted to Shio Chai. But the next year, he didn't pass the Jurin exam, so Wang Tao left the imperial exams behind, never advancing further on that thousand-year-old scholar path. In 1848, at 21, Wang Tao came to Shanghai to visit his father, who ran a private school. On his first trip to Shanghai, from seeing the misty waters from the boat to up-close views of Western buildings. Oh, Shanghai! This rising coastal city had a huge impact on Wang Tao. We should note this year, 1848, 8 years after the First Opium War and 6 years after the Treaty of Nanjing. It was the Treaty of Nanjing between the Qing government and Britain that made Shanghai a treaty port, letting Wang Tao see this different world. However, Shanghai's deep Western blend in business and life threw Wang Tao into deep thought at first. First, he worried about Shanghai's westernization, and British merchants gathering for trade would dilute Shanghai's negative feelings towards Britain as the opium source, affecting nearby cities. But meanwhile, Westerners could transport all sorts of goods under the name of trade. This also sparked Wang Tao's concerns about the Qing government's maritime defense efforts. In the summer of 1849, Wang Tao's father died, and he had to start taking on the responsibility for the entire family. That autumn, he found a job in Shanghai. He became an editor at the Mohai Book House, run by the Protestant London Missionary Society. The Protestant London Missionary Society is a propagation group for Protestant Christianity, and the Mohai Book House is a publishing house they established in Shanghai. The head was a British man named Medhurst, who Wang Tao already knew. At that time, a major project at the book house was translating and publishing the Bible. According to Wang Tao's autobiography, he was interested in Western studies when young and probably taught himself English back then, which allowed him to meet Medhurst and stay working at the book house. Most leaders at the Mohai Book House were foreigners who weren't fluent in Chinese, and they often interfered with Wang Tao's writing work, forcing him to produce pieces he wasn't satisfied with. But besides, ordinary people at the time held prejudices against Chinese like Wang Tao, who worked alongside foreigners.
Wang Tao was annoyed by these suspicious and disdainful looks, so he wasn't very satisfied with this job.
However, for survival, he had to keep doing it. To dispel these negative emotions, Wang Tao began expanding his social circle. Through his own interests and knowledge, Wang Tao met many like-minded friends, including 2 colleagues from the Mohai Book House, and they often chatted about everything, drinking tea and wine, which gave Wang Tao a more relaxed state of mind. The year 1854, which was his 6th year formally in Shanghai. And at 27, Wang Tao underwent the Christian baptism ceremony. You might wonder, why would Wang Tao, raised with traditional Chinese culture, join Christianity at this time? This may be related to his work experience at the Mohai Book House. As mentioned earlier, the Mohai Book House had a major project translating the Bible, and this version of the New Testament was very popular. By 1859, it had already gone through 11 editions. It continued to be used for over 80 years afterward. During this version's translation, Wang Tao was coincidentally serving as Medhurst's Chinese teacher. And because he gained a deep understanding of some Christian doctrines, Wang Tao accepting Christian baptism wasn't such a strange thing after all. Wang Tao's first direct encounter with history was tied to the Taiping Rebellion, and this event totally transformed his life path. In 1850, Hong Xiuquan led the Jintian uprising, and by 1853, he'd established the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom. In 1860, Taiping General Li Shucheng captured Wang Tao's hometown Suzhou. Back then, Wang Tao submitted several memorials advising local officials on countering the Taiping forces, covering guerrilla tactics like luring enemies deep, attacking, exhausting them, setting traps, and burning. Despite never commanding troops, his ability likely stemmed from helping Shanghai officers trained in city defense. Related, Wang Tao's guerrilla tactics shared similarities with guerrilla warfare that gained popularity decades later. But the government back then didn't seem to adopt them well. In January 1862, Wang Tao's mother fell gravely ill, so he returned to his hometown, and he didn't get back to Shanghai until May. While at home, Wang Tao wrote a set of political essays titled Tao Wan Wen Lu, discussing the Qing government's political, military, and economic issues, and offering suggestions on the Qing army's weaknesses. This collection marks a turning point in Wang Tao's thinking. The reform proposals and policy drafts in the essays blend traditional and innovative ideas. In Wang Tao's view, embracing tradition while not rejecting innovation actually helps tradition evolve. So why did Wang Tao write this collection at this particular time? It's highly likely tied to his earlier strategies being ignored by the government. Ignored by the Qing regime, Wang Tao grew more deeply aware of its corruption and incompetence. Heartbroken, Wang Tao penned this collection. While Wang Tao was at home, Qing troops in Shanghai intercepted a letter from the Taiping rebels. This letter, dated February 3, 1862, was signed by Huan Wan, courtesy name Lan Qing, and outlined specific plans for the Taiping to attack Shanghai. After investigating, Shanghai authorities concluded that this Huang Wan was actually Wang Tao. So, was Huang Wan really Wang Tao? If yes, why would Wang Tao, who'd been counseling the Qing regime against the Taiping, suddenly switch sides? Most scholars believe Huang Wan was Wang Tao, with solid evidence like both sharing the courtesy name Lan Qing, plus matching origins, writing styles, and even handwriting. Moreover, Wang Tao personally admitted having contact with rebels back home. Though he claimed it was for the Qing government, later discovered letters between missionaries and Taiping forces suggest otherwise. Whoa. Whoa. Evidence shows Wang Tao had previously met Hong Renjian, the Taiping's second-in-command, and likely encountered Li Shucheng when he attacked Suzhou in 1860. As we know, the Taiping forces had deep Christian roots. Hong Xiuquan founded the God-worshipping society after being inspired by Christian teachings, leading to the Jintian uprising and Taiping Heavenly Kingdom. So foreign missionaries were eager to engage with Taiping figures. Remember Wang Tao's employer Medhurst, head of Mohai Book House? He was a key figure in the Protestant London Missionary Society. In 1854, Wang Tao met Hong Rengan through Medhurst. By 1858, Hong Rengan was titled Gan Long and became the Taiping's chief administrator. In 1860, as missionaries deepened Taiping ties, Wang Tao, acting as intermediary, twice helped draft and revise documents for them. One letter was addressed to Hong Rengan. Another was for missionaries begging Li Shucheng to deliver to Hong Xichang. So, Huangwan being Wang Tao seems increasingly likely. Snubbed by the Qing court, yet connected to Taiping leadership, Wang Tao writing that 1862 letter makes perfect sense. These experiences convince many scholars Huangwan was indeed Wang Tao. After Shanghai authorities decided to arrest him, Wang Tao hid in the British consulate for 3.5 months. Then he sailed to Hong Kong on a British steamer, arriving in October 1862. In Hong Kong, Wang Tao met missionary James Legge. Oh, this Legge had previously worked closely with Gan Wang Hong Rengen in Hong Kong, further cementing Wang Tao's Taiping ties. Wang Tao worked as Legge's translation assistant, mainly rendering Chinese classics into English. He contributed to translating the 4 books, Book of Documents, Book of Songs, Zero Commentary, and Book of Rites. Wang Tao embraced this near-decade-long work passionately, largely because he wanted to bring China's Tao to the West, revealing his worldview. He wanted more Westerners to understand the real China, while also deepening his own knowledge of the West. In 1867, James Legge returned home due to illness and invited Wang Tao to his Scottish residence. Wang Tao departed as promised that year-end and reached Europe in early 1868. First, Wang Tao visited the Louvre in Paris and attended several operas. Oh, when Wang Tao arrived in London, he found himself quite famous there. A photography studio even took pride in taking his portrait, likely due to his translation work's influence. Additionally, Wang Tao was invited to speak at Oxford University's graduation class. In his lecture, he compared Confucian Tao with Christianity's heavenly Tao, earning applause from the entire audience. And praised at Legge's Scottish home, Wang Tao researched calendars and solar eclipses from the spring and autumn period. These research findings were not only highly praised by Legge, but later hailed by scholars as groundbreaking works. Wang Tao spent over 2 years in Europe total, mostly traveling and conducting academic research with Legge. During his European stay, Wang Tao carefully observed Western industry, railways, culture, and local customs. Though these experiences didn't drastically change his view of the West, they laid crucial groundwork for his later journalism career. In March 1870, Wang Tao returned to Hong Kong and began writing articles on historical reform themes. Soon, Wang Tao's writings gave him significant social influence, and his talents drew attention from Westernization faction officials. Even Zheng Guaofan and Li Hongzhang took interest. But Wang Tao, making his living through writing, ultimately chose journalism. This field connected well with his publishing and translation background, letting this innovative intellectual fully express his ideas. On February 4th, 1874, Wang Tao co-founded the Universal Circulating Herald, circulating meaning cyclical renewal. Wang Tao's cyclical view of history convinced him that although China was then declining, it would eventually return to greatness. Notably, this was the first fully Chinese-managed newspaper to achieve success. As its editor-in-chief, Wang Tao wrote many brilliant articles. His editorials and writings on Westernization affairs gained more and more recognition, inspiring many young Chinese reformers, including the then young Sun Yat-sen. Wang Tao continued working in journalism until his death in 1897. So, his influence in journalism circles kept expanding, and he even served as editor-in-chief of Shen Bao. Wang Tao's foundational role in modern Chinese journalism history is widely acknowledged. Lin Yutang regarded him as the father of Chinese journalism. It can be said that although Wang Tao didn't become a reformer through politics, he practiced reform as a journalist and political commentator. As we all know, worldview and historical view are one's perspectives on things, society, and history, and reform is an initiative involving the world and history. Therefore, a reformer's worldview and historical view deeply influence their reform theories. So, after learning about Wang Tao's life experiences, let's examine his worldview and historical view. The first point of Wang Tao's worldview is that people in traditional societies should understand modern Western culture. Wang Tao was born in the 1820s, received traditional Chinese cultural education, and died at the end of the 19th century. His unique experiences gave him the chance to study the West. The backwardness of the Qing government and the strength of the West made Wang Tao, with his traditional background, realize the necessity of understanding modern Western ways. The second point of Wang Tao's worldview is dissatisfaction with European powers. At that time, European powers expanded their influence through alliances, waging wars everywhere to plunder lands and resources across continents. Naturally, European powers were unjust. They formed alliances and launched massive wars, much like another spring and autumn period. War and alliances, power without justice, morality, and decline. These three characterize the European situation. The third point of Wang Tao's worldview is using his own understanding to depict national portraits. Wang Tao had many views on countries like Russia, America, and Japan. Russia's appetite for aggression is endlessly vast, like the tyrannical Qin of old, while America has a relatively democratic political system. In Wang Tao's eyes, Japan was a complex country. On one hand, his traditional side felt humiliated by Japan's military actions against the Qing government. On the other hand, his modernity made him keenly aware that the Qing government should learn from Japan's reform ideas, using tradition to understand modernity and modernity to transform tradition. This sentence can represent Wang Tao's worldview, while historical view is his collection of perspectives on past history and contemporary reality. Next, let's take a look at Wang Tao's historical view. The first point of Wang Tao's historical view is combining traditional historical narratives with modern research domains. On one hand, Wang Tao well inherited the tradition of historical narratives in China since Sima Qian's Records of the Grand Historian. On the other hand, Wang Tao leveraged his greater modernity advantage over contemporary scholars to shift the domain of historical research towards the West. This is reflected in his historical works such as Pufa Zhangji, Faguo Jile, Qifeng Yuan Shikao, and others. The second point of Wang Tao's historical view is using traditional models to understand modern history, and then using modern means to transform traditional society. Take his representative work, Faguo Zilue, as an example. Wang Tao understood France's internal governance system through traditional Chinese historical labels like Guangji Zhang Yu, Zhongji, Bali Ji Jun, e.g. Fan Shu Fuji. At the same time, Wang Tao, as a reformer with strong modernity, Wang Tao was also accustomed to comparing these systems, which were advanced and reasonable at the time, with China's indigenous systems. The third point of Wang Tao's historical view is the concept of Wuji Bifan, reverse at their extreme, and a cyclical historical view of the way of heaven. In the article Guo Tu Shua Shua, Wang Tao emphasized that the reasons for France's rise and fall lie in the way of heaven and human affairs, which he saw as a cycle. Thus, Wang Tao firmly believed that the barbaric and tyrannical power of the West at that time would inevitably lead to destruction because it wasn't guided by morality. And China, which had experienced the prosperous eras of Han and Tang dynasties, though currently declined, would eventually become strong again through reform. Having understood Wang Tao's worldview and historical view, now let's see what prescription Wang Tao, this reformer, prescribed for China at that time. The prescription is simple, nothing more than the word reform. In the late 1860s, Wang Tao emphasized that history was undergoing tremendous changes, and China's customs and institutions faced massive impacts, constantly at risk of destruction. Facing this impact and danger, the only thing China could do was learn from the West to strike back at the West. But learn what from the West? Wang Tao's precise term was Shiji Suo Chang, meaning learning the areas where the West excels. This actually echoes the famous saying by the renowned reformer Wei Yuan in the 1840s, "Learn the superior techniques of the barbarians to control them." Wei Yuan proposed it over 20 years earlier than Wang Tao. However, in comparison, Wang Tao's reform demands seemed more intense. He emphasized that China should change everything it can and carry out extensive reforms. Wang Tao's reform prescriptions include three aspects: educational reform, economic reform, and political reform. First, let's look at Wang Tao's educational reform proposals through his various claims on educational reform. Actually, his core point is talent. And regarding talent, Wang Tao elaborated on three questions. The first question: why is talent the core of educational reform? Whether in educational reform or national management, talent is a more important factor than systems and technology. Wang Tao believed that as long as the right person is placed in the right position, it can solve many real problems existing in China at that time. After all, talent is the implementer who solves problems. Even with the most advanced technology and systems, people are needed to realize and implement them. The second question: what kind of talent does the Qing government need? The answer is practical talent. Wang Tao said that talent has many levels. There are talents for being minor officials, talents for being generals, talents for being craftsmen, talents for diplomatic missions, talents for resisting enemies, talents for governing the country, talents for solving difficult problems. Clearly, Wang Tao valued the practicality of talent and understood its diversity. He believed that talent can only show their abilities when applied in their specialized fields. The third question: where to find practical talent?
Wang Tao proposed that talent should be recruited through exams and cultivated through education.
Wang Tao highly valued building technical schools, especially in science and engineering, because these areas could make the Qing government strong. Evidently, Wang Tao recognized the serious lack of technology in the Qing government, which aligns with the Westernization faction's advocacy. No wonder he gained appreciation from high-ranking officials of that faction.
Right.
Tao. Having discussed educational reform, we now move on to Wang Tao's economic reform. Wang Tao's economic reform can also be divided into three aspects. The first aspect is developing transportation. Living in the late 19th century, Wang Tao deeply felt the impact that trains, steamships, and telegraph brought to the world, both in the West and in China. And the application of these three is closely related to transportation. So Wang Tao proposed that the Qing government should prioritize developing steamship transport, building railways, and establishing its own telegraph system. This would greatly assist high-speed military communication. The second aspect of economic reform is developing mining and textile industries. The importance of these two industries is obvious. Mining strengthens military and manufacturing sectors, while textiles directly impact people's daily lives. Mastering these industries means controlling resources and markets. Wang Tao longed to open China's export markets. This would allow effective competition with Western powers, narrowing the power gap. Objectively, few investors then wanted to heavily invest in mining due to funding issues, and textiles face similar challenges. The third point: prioritize commerce and foreign trade. Chinese tradition always undervalued commerce, as seen in the scholar, farmer, artisan, merchant hierarchy. With modern insight, Wang Tao keenly realized commerce must be valued. Accelerating foreign trade was essential for the Qing dynasty's development. After economic reform, let's examine the last of Wang Tao's three reforms: political reform. First point: improve grassroots officials' quality. Wang Tao's historical insight revealed the imperial power stops at county-level problem, and minor officials were the direct interface with common people. Thus, improving their quality addressed problems at the root. Second point: learn from Western parliamentary systems. In his writings, Wang Tao closely studied Western parliaments. He found systems where lower houses debated with public consent highly reasonable. Britain's strength and prosperity gave Wang Tao hope. Third point, enhance military capability and quality. Wang Tao first stressed ensuring sufficient troop supply. Thus, he advocated a nation-in-arms policy across Qing territories. But Wang Tao emphasized that only sound governance could ensure troop quantity and quality. A military trusted by the people naturally gains effectiveness and quality. Thus, this reform largely depended on public trust in the government. All right, so that's Wang Tao's reforms in education, economics, and politics, advocating to leverage tradition, understand modernity, and use modernity to transform tradition, which also reflects reformer Wang Tao's approach to reform. So, why did Wang Tao have such unique reform ideas? Why was he able to go beyond the xenophobia typical of Chinese intellectuals of his time? Presumably, this is the question that concerns everyone more. Of course, the author of this book noticed this too. Therefore, in the final chapter of this book, the author begins researching a special group of modern intellectuals. Now, you might ask, what's so special about these intellectuals? Compared to emperors and generals, they indeed seem obscure in the river of history, but they lived during the most unique period in China's historical evolution, becoming pioneers of that era. What's more interesting is that these intellectuals all came from coastal areas. You should recall that this book's protagonist, Wang Tao, hailed from coastal Jiangsu province. Now we can realize that the author studied Wang Tao not only to understand modern China through him, but also to discover more enlightening things from people like him. As a coastal reformer, Wang Tao isn't an isolated case. So the author began researching 7 coastal reformers, using the keywords coastal and reform to extract the unique traits of this group. The first trait is their achievements in newly emerging modern industries. Like Wang Tao, these 7 minor historical figures made varying degrees of contributions in industries that only emerged in modern times. For example, Yang Wing, who initiated and promoted the Chinese educational mission to America, Ho Kai, who founded Alice Memorial Hospital, Tung Qingsing, who contributed significantly to shipping, Wu Tingfeng, China's first lawyer, who served as minister to multiple countries, and Zheng Guanying, who established China's first self-run cotton mill. The last 2 are brothers, elder brother Ma Liang and younger brother Ma Jianzheng. Ma Liang achieved much in Chinese education, politics, and religious activities, and co-founded Fudan University with Yan Fu. Younger brother Ma Jiancheng was Li Hongzhang's foreign affairs expert and later wrote the famous grammatical work Ma's Grammar. The second trait is their close ties to the Shanghai-Hong Kong corridor. They were all born near these metropolises, and Shanghai and Hong Kong, being the Chinese cities with deepest Western contact at the time, right now 85, gave long-term residents a unique perspective. Oh, these eyes allowed them to observe the world more comprehensively, creating greater possibilities for it. The third trait is the Christian cultural background. And so, actually, since ancient times, religion has had a profound yet obscure relationship with coastal regions. Famous historian Chen Yin-kei wrote a renowned article studying the relationship between the Celestial Masters' Taoism and coastal areas during the medieval period. After all, religion subtly influences people's thinking very easily. And in coastal areas with more exchanged opportunities, religion's effectiveness greatly increases. All 8 reformers had significant connections to Christianity. The fourth trait is close ties with Li Hongzhang. All 8 coastal reformers, including Wang Tao, had substantial connections to him, with most serving as his aides. However, Li Hongzhang seemed more focused on power than enthusiastically advancing their reform causes. Li, compared to these coastal reformers, early inland reformers like Fen Guifan, Guo Song Tao, Shui Fuqing, and Harm Zumxian also had coastal connections to varying degrees. Their reform proposals shared many similarities with those of coastal reformers. In the book's preface, the author discussed desired revisions that weren't implemented in the main text. Regarding the coastal early reformers discussion in the final chapter, the author stated that if rewriting it, he'd focus more on late 19th century inward looking reforms to better understand late Qing social changes and between tradition and modernity, Wang Tao and the late Qing reforms. That concludes our interpretation of this book. Reading notes are below the audio. See you next time.